This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
It's the second year of business on Africa's biggest trading platform, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. 8 countries, Cameroon, Egypt, Ghana, Kenya, Mauritius, Rwanda, Tanzania and Tunisia, are already participating in the AfCFTA's Guided Trade Initiative. The initiative, the first phase of trade on the AfCFTA platform, serves as a test run. Now more countries will join in the coming months. This week on the program, we examine how economic growth through regional integration can reduce poverty, cut inequality, and foster the inclusive development pillars of the African Union's Agenda 2063. I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area was established to create a continent-wide market, bringing together 55 countries with 1.3 billion people and a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion. In a report, the World Bank says the first phase of trade on the AfCFTA platform, which took effect on January 2021, was planned to gradually eliminate tariffs on 90% of goods and reduce barriers to trade in services. Trade in the bloc could raise incomes by 9% by the year 2035, reducing the number of people living in extreme poverty by 50 million across the continent. The significance of the AfCFTA cannot be overstated. Projections by the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa show that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area will raise intra-African trade by 15 to 25% or by $50 billion to $70 billion by 2040. The AfCFTA is also expected to raise foreign direct investment and bring new capital, fresh technology and additional skills which would lift the standard of living and reduce Africa's dependence on primary and commodity exports, a study by the Observer Research Foundation indicates. And joining me now to take a closer look at the progress made at the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area in the last 2 years are from Nairobi, Dr. Bruno Linyeru, Secretary of State, Department of Trade at the Kenyan Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development. From Accra, Dr. Francis Mangeni, Head of Trade Promotion and Programs, Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat. And from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, Gabriel Mwangonda, an economic analyst specializing in diplomacy, politics and economics. Gentlemen, thank you very much and welcome to the program. Dr. Mangeni, I'll start off with you. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area is an ambitious trade pact to form the world's largest free trade area. It is now in its second year of business. How successful has it been so far in terms of implementation?
Thank you, Beatrice. The African Continental Free Trade Area has been very successful since trading started on the 1st of January 2021. As an example, on the 7th of October last year, 2022, we had the Guided Trade Initiative, which showcased, which demonstrated to us as Africa and the whole world that the AfCFTA actually functions, that it's possible to send a consignment from one African country to another African country under the AfCFTA regime. So Kenya shipped off a tea consignment from Nairobi through Mombasa to Ghana. Rwanda shipped off a coffee consignment from Kigali to Accra, Ghana, right? And then we had Mauritius as well participating, Egypt as well participating. On its part, Ghana shipped off ceramic tiles to Cameroon. And all these consignments were done using the AfCFTA certificates of origin. And these consignments got the reduced customs duties or tariffs, which are available as preferential treatment under the AfCFTA.
Dr. Linyeru, I want to get your practical example here, because Kenya is one of the countries that is trading under the guided trade initiative, as mentioned by Dr. Mangeni. What have we seen in the immediate and short term? Have we seen any increase in trade, for example? How has that guided trade initiative worked for Kenya?
Kenya is among the 8 countries that have founded the guided trade initiative. And just also to reemphasize that Kenya is among the first countries to sign and ratify the AfCFTA. And therefore, again, we've coming together of 8 countries, including Ghana, including Rwanda, Cameroon, Tunisia, Egypt, and Tanzania. We've come together, like my colleague Dr. Mangeni has said, to kickstart this process. As you recall, this trading began in 2021, but meaningful trade had not taken place. And therefore now, through this initiative of the AfCFTA Secretariat, with countries, with the partner states that were keen on making this move forward, Kenya was among the first countries to get this initiative running, whereby His Excellency, our President, William Samoei Ruto, launched that initiative in terms of moving our tea in the month of October under the AfCFTA guidelines. And this tea, well, it landed in Accra, though it took a bit of a while, like 45 days, but at least meaningful trade had begun under the AfCFTA.
So, Gabriel, you know, analysts believe intra-regional trade could rise to at least 33% in the next few years. From where you sit, though, are we on track to attain that figure?
I can say we're on track because we're still under a period that some countries are kind of trying to educate their citizens, who are the most big players in this free trade area agreement. So far, we haven't seen any significant change as the way it used to be previously. But we hope that with proper information platforms that will be used to educate business people, business community, because these are the lead participants in the platform. So these people are the ones who are supposed to be given proper information for them to be key players in this platform.
Dr. Mangeni, transportation has been put out there as one of as a challenge to effective implementation of the AfCFTA. Could you just take us back to find out which areas are proving a challenge for full implementation and which areas are on schedule?
What happens is that the shipping companies want to consolidate their cargo. So they go around like a matatu or a bus, picking, consignments from place to place. So something which is leaving Mombasa coming to West Africa can maybe even go to Singapore first, before it comes over to Accra. Now, what this means is that we need, as Africa, to have our shipping lines which plow our cost lines. Maybe we need what's called short sea shipping or cabotage, where we can have more or less the equivalent of a bus service around the coast of Africa, moving from Mombasa through Mozambique, picking up, consignments along the way. Many ships, smaller ships, and facilitating trade. But now, Beatrice, you said what are the other challenges? So in addition to transport and logistics, which is huge, and it's a cost to doing business, we also need to make sure that we facilitate payments. Say, for instance, someone is exporting from Kenya to Accra. They want to get paid. They want someone in Accra to pay them for the tea, for the excise battles. Right. Now, sometimes payments can be very difficult because we have to route it through maybe New York or, London, things like that, which attracts a charge, and it's estimated that we pay an equivalent of $5 billion annually in charges, but also takes time, maybe 3 days, maybe a week. What we have now done is to set up what we call the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, where the payment is instantaneous. It happens within 24 hours. And also it can be done in local currency. So the payer in Ghana can go to his bank or her bank and pay in cedis. And then the payee in Kenya will receive it in Kenya shillings. And this is really very efficient.
Let me bring in Dr. Linyiru here. Dr. Linyiru, Dr. Mangeni has talked about some of the challenges and how the Secretariat is dealing with that. But I want to hear from your perspective because you're on the ground. Talk us through the steps that the CFTA, now that the CFTA has been operationalized, what are you going through?
Maybe as a country, just to bring it locally, is that we have the implementation strategy for the AfCFTA, to ensure that first we sensitize our traders, the players in the various sectors about the export markets that are available. For example, here in Kenya, we're already trading with the EAC. Therefore, what we need is to go out to the other regional economic blocs, whether you want to go now out there to SADC, to SACU, to ECOWAS. Therefore, for us is to bring together the traders, the participants, the players, and let them know that this new market that's available for them and that we need to trade more as Africans to create value for our products so that we again move away from trading traditional raw products, raw materials, and then add value and then be able to reach to some of the countries like West Africa and open new markets. Therefore, there is a strategy and implementation committee, national one, that has been working on this, both also bringing together women and youth and many other participants to make sure that we tap into the benefits that AfCFTA brings to this country.
So, Gabriel, it is 2 years since the implementation of the Africa CFTA, and you're talking about not having seen any significant changes. I mean, you own a logistics company. How has it been for you in terms of trading?
I can testify that nothing almost has changed on the ground. Maybe they're still maybe at the point of negotiating on how best they can implement it. But really, we haven't felt anything on the ground. And so far, very many obstacles, which are non-tariff and some are tariff-based, are still in place. We have seen even in the regional bloc, which is East African community, the trade between Kenya and Tanzania still have some issues, of which I think you can testify that the then president of Kenya, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, sat down with Samia Suluhu Hassan to just try to settle down all the bottlenecks between the trade between Kenya and Tanzania. So that can give you a picture of how difficult it is to, say that anything that has been done so far at that large level of at the continental level. If at the block level we have those issues, just have a picture on how difficult it is to implement at the continental level.
Dr. Mangeni, building on that point, because the CFTA builds specifically upon the SADC, COMESA, and the East African community, how is it incorporating the existing recs?
What the AfCFTA tries to do now is to promote trade across the regional economic communities. So under the EAC countries are already trading with each other. COMESA countries are already trading with each other. So Kenya is in both EAC and COMESA, and their duties are zero, have come down to zero, right? Tanzania is in SADC, so it's in the SADC FTA. So what we would like is EAC countries to trade with ECOWAS countries, right? To trade with Northern African countries. Because at the moment, apart from the AfCFTA, there's no other trade regime on the continent which deals with preferential regime between countries that are not in the same rank, in the same regional economic community. So the value addition of the African Continental Free Trade Area is to create a single continental market across the whole of Africa, so that the members of the regional economic community can trade with countries that are not in their regional economic community. Now, this principle is so fundamental. The AfCFTA agreement underscores it. This principle is written in the agreement in 3 different places. The idea that regional economic communities are building blocks. The idea that the AfCFTA will build on their key. Their key means what has been implemented by the regional economic communities. So they are incorporated, the regs are incorporated by recognizing them, but also by urging them, the countries, to trade with other countries that are not in the same reg, and therefore providing a trade regime which enables that inter-reg trade. So that's how the AfCFTA tries to deal with.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to take a short break now. When we come back, we'll look at what the future may hold for the African Continental Free Trade Area. To stay with us. Welcome back to Talk Africa. Well, still with me on the program, Dr. Bruno Linyiru, Dr. Francis Mangeni, and Gabriel Mwangonda. Before the break, we looked at how implementation of the AfCFTA has progressed over the last 2 years. Let's now examine the likely short, mid, and long-term outcomes of trade on the platform. Dr. Mangeni, you know, African businesses and countries trade internationally, even though our share of global trade is only about 3%. Now, China is today Africa's biggest trade partner. Will a growth in intra-Africa trade affect trade with international trade partners?
Intra-Africa trade is low, but it has been growing. The correct figure now of intra-Africa trade is 28.4%. What we usually see in books on the internet is that intra-Africa trade is maybe 10% or 16%. That figure is actually wrong. If you look at how much we import, right, from the rest of the world, much of it is available on the continent next door. Just look at what Kenya imports, what Tanzania imports, whether it's medicines or even agricultural products, food products. They are available next door on the African continent. So there is potential to actually grow intra-Africa trade by simply sourcing from within the region, from the continent. So all that we need is market information to know what's available where. And then, of course, transport, as we said earlier, to make sure that we can move consignments, goods from A to B, point A to point B. And also, of course, good internet connections, good in order to do trading services over the internet as well. But then let me just make one more point of view, don't mind. We also need to industrialize. We need to produce more. Industrialization is really the backbone of structural transformation. You cannot trade what you don't have, so you need to produce it. So we need industrialization. This means regional value chains, value addition, but more importantly, new products being brought on the market.
Right. Dr. Linyiru, that question of industrialization, with Kenya being one of the countries under the GTI, lack of a manufacturing base, though, has been a weakness for the continent. What would you say is the state of manufacturing if countries are to add value in order to maximize on the agreement?
Thank you, Beatrice. And again, I appreciate my comments from my colleague there that we are doing more trade in Africa than previously stated. Various data out there indicate 17, 14%. Now, authoritatively, we have him saying 28%. I'm happy to hear that. We are happy to grow this trade even to 30, 40, at least somewhere where other regions are. We look at other regions, they are 60%, 40%. Coming back to your question of manufacturing, and also relating it directly to what you're asking, whether inter-Africa trade will reduce the trade with other regions in the world. Not necessarily so. We might still need a lot of them to come in here and help us set up plants, help us manufacturing plants, because we want to add value to what we are selling out there, not selling raw products. If it is automotive industry, we will still want to do it here, but then pick, for example, materials from Congo, we take others to South Africa. One country is able to produce a complete vehicle relying from all parts having come from Africa. What this calls for is that we'll still be able to trade with our European, with Chinese partners, with all our partners, but then what we want is capital investment, proper investment here, whereby now this will go into the productive sector so that we upscale our productivity and then be able to compete like the rest of the regions of the world, selling complete products, not selling raw materials to go and process out there. Yes, in Kenya, we're working towards that. We have lots of interest in the investment already. We are upscaling, and we are looking at the next 3 or 4 years to see serious growth in our manufacturing sector. We have a very, very robust plan. As you've seen our minister pronounce himself there, even for things that we really can manufacture here, we want to reduce, bring them in until we are first able to produce here, and then bring what is absolutely important.
So,
Thank you.
Dr. Linyuru, I want to understand a little bit better, because you're talking about robust plans in place. Clarify that for us a bit more.
There's a deliberate plan that the government is investing in manufacturing more than ever before. And therefore, we want, for example, whatever is going out there is no longer, you've heard already our president pronounce himself, especially give an example of tea, that the processed tea that goes out is like 5%. We want at least to get to 50%, whereby we are selling tea there, not tea as a raw product to go and blend other teas of the world. We want to ensure that our manufacturing here, our packaging is complete. You take the tea ready for consumption, not just going to other countries to be processed there again and then labeled another brand, when actually it's Kenyan tea.
But I also want to look at one of the other challenges for Africa, because that is the free movement of people, due to restrictions and so forth. You've talked about transportation as being a challenge. You've talked about the manufacturing base, also being quite limited. This movement of skilled labor, where are we at? Is the AfCFTA structured to address this?
It depends on the levels, and at the block level, I've seen there's a bit of a problem, because even as of now, if you have an expatriate coming from the other country to maybe Tanzania, they has to pay two fees, the residence permit and the work permit. Now, if we have to remove all those kind of stuff, maybe that I can say we have a free movement of labor and expatriates from within the continent. But as far as I know, every country in the continent is charging the very same charges, and it becomes very expensive. Because, for example, in my country, we might be lacking some skills. If you need to employ someone from maybe whichever country that you think they have enough of those missing skills, you'd be, as a manufacturing company, maybe owner, or as the owner of the company, you'd be subjected to pay those kind of fees, which are very expensive, actually, which in turn actually keeps on increasing the prices because of the goods produced, because eventually the consumer has to bear that cost, and it makes it very uncompetitive when it comes to comparing with other items imported from those manufacturing hubs. So far, for us who are on the ground, we say, until we remove all those kind of fees, maybe that I can tell you, we have a free movement of labor. So as far as we do understand that we don't have such kind of stuff.
Dr. Linyuru, I want to get your final view here. What do you view as some of the priorities that member states such as Kenya should focus on in the medium, in the short term and in the long term to make the implementation process, successful?
I think from Kenya, we see it as it's a journey. It will not be achieved in one day, and that's why we went the route of guided initiative. Now going forward to encourage more and more countries to pick the products that they are able to trade and move this process forward, because it is part of the agenda for AU, and it has come out very well. We've already seen the trade that is happening, and more countries should embrace this. Going forward also, the countries that have not ratified and deposited the documents also should be able to do so that the whole of Africa, we are all involved and moving together. Going forward also is that the AfCFTA, like we already said there, can adopt the example of the East African region where we have seamless trade. Similarly, this should be able to translate into other borders so that, again, especially on the cross-border trade, is facilitated among the rest of the regions in Africa. This is the only way to boost, to ensure that women and youth, who are the major partners in terms of the cross-border trade, are able to be facilitated to move forward. As a country in Kenya, we are working on this to ensure that these sectors of our society are sensitized and they continue to embrace this to take our products to the rest of the region.
All right, Dr. Mangeni, of course, political will is very key here. What do you view as the priorities that these countries should focus on?
Right. So political will, yes, and the political will around the AfCFTA is very high. The momentum is very high. The ownership is very, very good. So as we talk now, we are at 45 countries. 45 African countries have ratified the AfCFTA. So we just have 10 more to go. And as Bwana PS has said, we need to continue urging them to do so. So now the priorities are implementation. Implementation. That's really very important. And then continuous compliance. Now that we have trade happening, we need to make sure the regulatory authorities are implementing the agreement. Customs authorities are facilitating trade rather than blocking it. Standards authorities are facilitating trade rather than blocking it. Immigration officials are facilitating people to move around rather than blocking it. So this is extremely important, implementation. Then secondly, we need the private sector to embrace the AfCFTA and utilize it. If we have the AfCFTA, but the private continue trading with the third countries outside Africa, and they just ignore the AfCFTA, that's not useful at all. So the governments have negotiated the AfCFTA to follow up the trade and investment opportunities around the continent.
All right, Gabriel, I want to get your final comments, because some of the main drivers of the Africa CFTA are to provide better jobs, reduce poverty, and increase shared prosperity in Africa. So from where you sit, what needs to happen for this to be achieved?
You need to make sure that these economies of our continent keeps on flourishing. How do you make sure that they do flourish? Is through policies. We don't even want this government to keep on, pumping money into private companies. It's just to make proper policies whereby you allow maybe good policies on PPP arrangements. You allow, you put good monetary policies on all these central banks to make sure that they keep favorable terms in order to have lower interest rates that will attract even capital for people to, start new businesses, to start manufacturing companies, and to start other services-based businesses, which, in turn, will solve two biggest problems of these countries. First of all, it will reduce the unemployment problem. It will increase the tax payments, because collection of tax is still an issue in these countries. So the private sector is the only solution to these two problems, because in the end, the key players in this free continent trade area will be eventually business people. So for this government to keep on enjoying the fruits of this free trade area,
right,
they need to make sure that the business community is well nurtured and it keeps on flourishing every now and then.
All right. Thank you very much for your insights here. But that's all we have time on this edition of Talk Africa. Big thank you to all our guests. Dr. Bruno Linyiru, Secretary of State, Department of Trade at the Kenyan Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development. Dr. Francis Mangeni, Head of Trade Promotion and Programs, Africa CFTA Secretariat, and Gabriel Mwangonda, an economic analyst specializing in diplomacy, politics, and economics. Remember, you can be a part of this conversation online through our social media handles on Facebook and Twitter. You can also catch the show on our YouTube playlist. To keep the conversation going, and join us again next week for more Talk Africa. From me, Beatrice Marshall, and the team here in Nairobi. Until next time, bye-bye.